Welcome. You're listening to the Leading Hope Podcast. My name is VJ Williams, here with my friend and pastor Kevin Jack. Thank you for joining us and taking time out of your day to become a better leader. If you're new, we release a new episode every Wednesday. We'd love for you to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. And hey, listen, also please rate and review on Apple Podcasts. A few extra minutes will absolutely help get this in the hands of more leaders just like you that are trying to get better like us. And visit leadinghope.online to get updates, find out more about the Leading Hope community. Kevin, we start a new episode. A new episode, 204. We are not looking at each other this time.
No, the table's back, at least for right now.
We needed somewhere to put our arms. We didn't know what to do with our hands. We didn't know what to do with our hands.
Every episode.
So we're back. But today you have got a new episode called The Four Frames.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to see what you've got. Tell us what this is going to be about.
So this is, I've kind of held off on pulling this out in the podcast.
Holding back, are you?
This is the thing that I've been teaching other pastors and leaders most often recently. And so sometimes I'll use that, shockingly enough, I'll use in process of to go, I'll teach other people it live.
Yeah.
And then it'll make its way into the podcast. So I want to make sure
it's made its way into a few things. Staff Advance.
Yeah.
Recently. It's been powerful teaching. So I'm excited.
So we'll see how far we get today. This could be like a mini two-parter. We'll just see how we go. So here's the original idea to this is we've talked about some before that you have to diagnose something properly before you know how to treat it. That I don't know if any of you have ever walked into the doctor and you're like, I've got this symptom and it's COVID. Sorry, fun joke. Just for me. But the idea that I don't know if you've ever seriously walked into a doctor and you said a couple words and the doctor, oh, you have this, and just kind of feeling like, I don't know. It could be more serious than that. I'm not sure exactly if that's the case of what's going on here. And one of the key pieces is that proper treatment only is ever effective if you first have proper diagnosis. If you don't have proper diagnosis, then you don't actually know what you're treating, and you don't know if the treatment that's going to go about that is effective. Here's our tendency. Our tendency is we want to rush to a solution, and we miss the diagnosis as a very, very important part of getting the proper solution.
Yeah.
So I would just encourage us. So part of this is understanding you will save yourself effort and energy if you pause long enough on the front end to ensure that you actually know what the problem is. Now, here's our tendency. Is not just rushing towards the solution. Our other tendency is we label all things the same way. I don't want to antagonize people entirely because my desire is to equip them with this teaching. But I'm always fascinated in life how much people don't realize how much they are the common denominator in all of the problems that they face. And I am sure that I do this as well. Okay. I know that's there in the case, but we have this belief of it's a people problem, or it's a system problem, or it's the teacher, or it's the school, or it's the traffic, or it's all these other things. And it's just amazing to me how much people cannot broaden their perspective on what the problems actually might be. And so what happens, because they assume it's always the same thing, then they misdiagnose it. And so they never actually solve the problem that they're facing. So this is what I want to do today. So I want to give you 4 frames, view these as glasses that you would put on. Okay. 4 frames on how you could look at problems in terms of what is the actual problem taking place. And now you know how to treat it. So I just want to walk through, especially in this episode, I want to walk through what the 4 frames are so we know, hey, what we're facing. So the 4 frames, very simply, are vision, strategy, leadership, and spiritual. Put faith, put whatever category, whatever word you want in there. Vision, strategy. You could also put structure, systems, if you prefer that language, but they largely exist in the same category. Okay, vision, strategy, leadership, and spiritual, or faith. Good?
Good.
So here's the unique thing. I have now had the privilege of stepping into 3 different churches, okay, as a leader.
Right.
Every church that I have stepped into has a communication problem.
Yeah.
This is a statement everywhere. We just have this massive communication problem. We've got issues. No one knows what's going
And
on.
it's not just the 3 churches, too. Like,
True.
right.
But it's just been interesting walking in the area. What's your greatest issue? Communication.
Yeah.
And the first thing that I identify in those spots is to go, you don't have a communication problem. You have a vision problem. That's the issue. It is like you have not clarified in any way what you're trying to become, what you're trying to do. And so what happens is that is because people don't know where we're headed, none of the things that they're doing make sense. And so they assume they need more information about everything that's going on. It's kind of like if you were telling someone to follow you, I don't mean to break this down too heavy as a vision podcast,
Yes.
but I want people to understand why this matters so much. If you were to tell someone to follow you, and you made driving in your car something like that, they would have a heck of a time if you were making frequent turns.
Yeah.
But if you told them where you were going, and then if you don't know the way, follow me, and they had a vague idea as to where that place was,
Yep.
it would be a lot easier for them to follow
It's
you.
really good.
And so what happens is people go, we have a communication problem. No, probably not. Like, if there is no information being put out there, if the right information isn't being put out there, yes, you have a communication problem. But my guess is, for the most part, you actually have a vision problem. So vision issues really stem from people don't know where you're headed. My guess is that if you have vision issues, it's not simply that people don't know where you're headed, it's that you don't know where you're headed. Ooh. And so if you've never sat down and set forth and say, hey, this is where we need to go, you're going to struggle with vision issues. Now, let me pause for just a second so this makes sense, okay? If I am skilled at using a hammer, which I am not, there's going to be a tendency that for every single problem, I pull out my hammer because that's the tool that I use.
Yeah.
I could give the age-old, the dad who fixes everything with duct tape.
Yeah.
Genius. This is all I know how to use. None of the problems are actually really fixed or permanently fixed, but I'm good with the duct tape.
Yep.
I know how to handle this.
Yeah.
And so the tendency is, I think we get in leadership and life and we get skilled at a tool. And so we assume everything is that needs to use that tool.
Yep.
So some things are vision issues. Other things are strategy issues. Okay? They're systems, structure, whatever you want to put in there. Some of those other pieces, they are strategy issues. Now, if you try to solve a vision problem with a strategy solution, you haven't actually solved it. Like, nothing has gotten better. If you try to solve, like, if your communication problem is people don't know what we're trying to accomplish, and you hear we have a communication problem, so you up your number of emails, you're just antagonizing people.
Yeah.
Because you haven't actually fixed what the issue is. So vision issues, people don't know where you're headed. Strategy issues is people get frustrated because they get stuck. Now, if there's a vision issue, your people aren't moving at all because they don't, or if I could acknowledge it like this, it's not that they're not moving at all.
Nerd.
It's they're moving in every single direction they have already decided they want to go. If you just give it like real simply, the word division is 2 visions. Like, that's what we're saying. We've taken one vision and now we have multiple visions, which is why people are going different directions. And so let's talk about strategy issues for just a second. Strategy issues are when people get stuck. One of my favorite quotes is Peter Drucker says, organizations are intended to enable ordinary people to do extraordinary things. Then when we have structures and pieces and processes in place, what you do is you take someone with ordinary gifting, and now they're able to do significantly more than what they're just naturally capable of because of all the structure, strategy, and systems. When there is a lack of strategy, you take gifted people and you make them mediocre. Because now they are frustrated by this lack of process, this lack of clarity. They're having to design everything over and over again every time. That's a funny thing people do, is they have to solve the problem every single time because they've never documented how they solved the previous problem.
Yeah.
And so it's just like, it comes up again. All right, well, let's figure out how to do this. No, maybe you solve it the same way you did before because it's the same kind of problem. Right. So we have we have vision issues. We have strategy issues. The other side of it is we might have leadership issues. Now, I want to clarify what this is, okay? Because part of leadership is developing a vision. Part of leadership is developing a strategy. But leadership issues fall more on who the person is. And you could, if you're like want to create your own categories, which is kind of what I do. I hear other people say stuff and I go, I like how I say it more, so I'm going to write it this way. You could also put culture here because the culture is the leader and the leader is ultimately responsible for the culture. But as we talk through, I'll just use the broader base leadership issues. How's it feel? How's the team work together? How are people connecting? Do they care for each other? Do they like each other? Are they doing the best work possible within there? How is morale in this moment? How's the energy in the room? All these other pieces. These are leadership questions. Now, if you have a bad leader, okay, if you have someone who drains people, who wears people out, who other people don't want to work with, and you give them a great strategy, you will still have a horrible culture because strategy responses do not fix leadership issues.
Yep.
If you have a bad leader and you give them a great vision, it will not improve the culture because the leader is responsible for the culture. That's good. And so I just want to see things in these like three different categories first off, and then we'll get to the last one in a second. And just to say, like, these are different issues that require different responses. Yeah. And if you're looking at something and you're going, everything's, John Maxwell's famous for saying, everything rises and falls on leadership. Agreed. But if you assume that the way you lead is just to build the morale of the team and get moving and you never develop a strategy, it's not going to rise very much.
Right.
Like it's always going to be limited by that lack of piece. If you have a great leader who is not skilled in developing a vision or has no personal vision for their life and you go, everything rises and falls on leadership, it's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's going somewhere that doesn't actually matter. So these are like the three main one when it comes to leadership. Anything you want to jump into?
No, I'll wait until they get through the last one. I have some questions about the other ones, but yeah, let's move on.
Okay, so then here's the last piece, and I think this is important. And I'm not trying to say in any way on these that like, hey, these are, because they can be a combination of the two. That's what we'll probably get into in the next episode based upon how far we get today. But the fourth category is spiritual, or I would just categorize it simply as faith. Okay. And I think this exists everywhere, and it needs to be a framework no matter what organization you're in, no matter what work you're doing. But it absolutely has to be a part of the framework if you're part of a church, if you're leading in a church in any way. Because here's the tendency is it needs to be one of the four. Because one of the tendencies is I have found that leaders of faith attempt to overly spiritualize every single problem there is. And while I believe there is a spiritual element, there are some problems that are not meant to be prayed out of. If you go to the Bible real simply, the Bible gives more actions than simply pray to God about it.
Yeah.
Like for some things, he says, you need wisdom, you need counselors, you need to go do this. Like Jesus says it like this. He says, hey, what man, if he went to build a tower, would not first like ascertain his resources and count the cost as to if he was able to complete it before he ever started it? Now look at that. You see vision. He's going to build a tower. You see strategy. He's going to see, does he have the resources that are necessary? He does not say what man before he builds a tower will not pause and pray to God and ask him if he should build the tower. Like we see there are other things at play. So I want to first clarify. One of the reasons why this is so important that we look at it in one of the frameworks is because we'll have a tendency to assume that that one is everything and everything is just a spiritual problem. Or the other tendency is you work in maybe non-faith related space, or maybe you're just really structurally system-minded and you completely discount the faith element. So let me talk about faith in terms of the leadership piece. And this is what I mean by faith. I especially mean, I think the thing that comes out more than anything else is C.S. Lewis said it like this. He said, the greatest sin is pride. It's self-righteousness. Pride is the one that it kind of gets up under you. You can't ever really quite say this is it, but you know it when you see it, and it absolutely derails absolutely everything else in your life. Pride is the thing. This sense of self-importance, this overly stated sense of personal significance is what the real issue is. Now, if you are a fantastic vision, if you know how to lead, if you know how to build strategy, but you're full of yourself, things are going to plummet. Or maybe that all of a sudden, that lack of spiritual element will lead to a sense of entitlement that even when you're on top of the world and the thing that you've attempted to climb and the thing that you've attempted to like actually get to the mountain on, all of a sudden it'll come crumbling down because you think that your son's sense of self-significance allows you to take liberties in terms of morality that you were never allowed to take. And so when you're looking at problems, here's just kind of my brief sum up. When you're looking at problems, you have to look at it not through simply, here's a problem, because all problems are different. And there's different categories. And we could probably break it out into like, hey, here's 12 categories. Hey, the faith one, here's the 4 different distinctions of the faith one. And I just kind of want to start here. We're not going to go that far next week, but I want to show you especially how to utilize this tool next week. But say, when you're looking at problems, if you're going to actually treat the problem, you need to first diagnose it. And the piece of diagnosis is to first go, what kind of a problem is this? Is this a vision-based problem? Is this a strategy problem? Is this a leadership issue? Or is this a spiritual issue? And your response will be different for each one of them. You do not pull out the hammer for every single problem. You need to find the right tool for proper solution.
Wow.
That was a lot.
It's a lot in a good way. The 4 frames. In the next, you've alluded to this a couple times in the next episode. So we're going to carry this episode on if you're listening. We're going to move this into episode 2, which will be 205 of the 4 frames. So if you're listening, you need to continue to listen next week. Are we going to dive into these individually, or are we going to take it a different route? Because I don't want to ask questions that we're going to carry on to the next episode.
Let's we can dive just a smidge to make sure people understand it.
Let's just talk about vision because it's just the one that we started with. The other spiritual stuff, I think there's questions in there that people want to have need more explanation.
Fair.
The vision piece, I thought you talked about, and I never heard you say that before. It's, hey, follow me. You're in your car. It's how many times have we left our place and you said follow me, but you didn't know where they were going?
Yeah.
Like literally, I can tell you at so many places, and then I get caught at the light and it's over. I don't know where they went, and I don't know where we're going, and I don't have the address.
Yep.
But when I have the address, I can still follow you, but I don't need to be right behind you.
Exactly.
And that's an incredible thing. I'm watching this show called 1883.
Yeah.
And if you're not familiar, it's the 10 episodes of the Oregon Trail, right? They start in Fort Worth, they get above the plains, and then they start the path.
Yeah.
And the vision is they're going to make it to Oregon. That's the vision. But the thing that really clarifies it for me in that or in one of the episodes is when they get to the actual first obstacle of, if you don't know what it is, they've got about, 50 to 100 people they're trying to get that don't have any way to protect themselves, any leadership, and these guys are trying to help them get there.
Yep.
Right? They're the leaders that are giving them the vision they know, but they don't know how to actually achieve it.
Yep.
And they get to the river. And that's kind of like, for me, the church.
Yeah.
It's like, that's okay, now we got to do church. Like, we need to get everybody over the river.
Yep, to the
right?
other side.
That's when you really feel culture has taken place.
Yeah.
Is when you teach them how to actually get across. But at first, they don't know how to get it. And so everyone's trying their own way to get across the river. And that's kind of the church world for me, is everyone has an idea of how to do it, but then they're falling off at different places because they can't get across the river. And that's just a clarifying point, is vision has to have an address.
Absolutely.
And that's just simple as it gets. And for us that are trying to create culture based on vision, what's the one thing that you said these all have different problems. What's the one problem you're faced with vision once you start to align your strategies with it? What is the thing that you go, oh, this is the hill I have to take? Because I think a lot of people are like, oh yeah, the vision, that's great. Like, but what's that first thing that you're met with it? You've got to. What's the river?
Well, I would say it as personally.
Yeah.
Or just vision as a whole.
No, personally for you.
Oh man. I mean, I would say the biggest piece of my vision is who the church is for.
Okay.
That the church is not meant for the insiders.
That's great.
And like sometimes I'll hear people say, this is where I get like a little mean, because I think it's a faith issue. It's not just a vision issue. But when people are like, church isn't for the outsiders, church is for the insiders, church is for people who are already Christians. And I just go, all right, if you're going to take theological shots at this, if you want to like, this sounds bad, if you want to fight on this, I'll fight.
Yeah.
Because I know.
Right.
Like, in the reality is people who utilize weird verses out of context that describes the first century church that was already under persecution as a way of saying that worship gatherings are for those who only believe in Jesus is just unbelievably ridiculous and completely unaware of the culture and context of the Bible and everything else Scripture says about what the church was meant to be. So for me, that's my hill.
That's the line you're drawing in the sand. It's like I'm standing on that hill, and I'm not going to back down from it.
And I would argue to the point that if you said that church is for only people who are already in, I would argue that's not church. Your actual definition of what church is not church.
We're going to stop right there.
Let's stop
right there. That's a really good segue.
Or if I get going more, it'll be bad.
Yeah, I want the tension to carry on into the next episode. Thank you for joining us, taking time. I'm not even going to let you sum it up. We're going to the next.
Good.
Thank you for taking time to join us today. We'd love for you to post about it, rate and review, or both. You won't believe how that helps get this podcast in the hands of so many more leaders like you. We love hearing your stories, how the Leading Hope podcast is helping in your life or business. If you have a story, visit leadinghope.online and send that to us. We'd love to hear from you. Join us next week for part 2 of the 4 frames. And remember, everyone has 20 minutes to learn to become a better leader. Make it count. Woo!